And we are back at the Fearless Studio at the 2024 Fearless Summit. And guess who I dragged into the studio? One and only Pastor Muriithi Wanjau.
Great to be here.
So good to have you, Pastor M. And we are at the 15th edition of the Fearless Summit.
Yeah.
We've had 15 of these.
Yeah.
I don't know when you were thinking about possibilities of the Fearless Summit, if you thought that it would turn out to be this way. Tell us a little bit about the evolution of the Fearless Summit.
Yeah, I mean, it's had several phases. First
Yeah.
of all, thanks for having me here. Really
Yeah.
excited, but it's had several phases.
Yeah.
Phase one, we just started it because we had a passion. I mean, I remember in the early days of Mavuno, just a strong passion to influence society. We kept saying that we're turning ordinary people into fearless influencers of society.
Correct.
So we thought, what if we could gather all our congregation members for a conference,
Yeah.
bring some amazing speakers, and
Yeah.
just challenge them how they can impact every sector of society. So we did it in 2009. It was so successful.
Yeah.
And it was one of those you come out and you're like,
Wow.
what just happened?
Yeah.
And immediately I just had a tinge of guilt. Like, it's like you get a gourmet chef and you have an amazing meal and then you're alone. And I was like, we should have had other people there. This was too good to have by ourselves.
Yeah.
So we said we must invite other people. So 2010, we actually invited some of our friendly churches to come and visit. And then it just took a life of its own and really grew. We got a lot of people coming. At one point, we had people from so many different continents showing up.
Yeah.
Many different nations. It became a really big fixture every year.
Yeah.
And so I think that was the next evolution. And at that point, the real focus was, hey, just challenge everybody. Think about what sector of society you're supposed to impact. Get psyched. I mean, just give a sense of inspiration and then go out and make a difference. That was actually the thing. Just go and do it.
Yeah.
I feel like in this latest phase, which is probably the last 5 years, mostly after COVID,
Yeah.
has really been more of a realization, which is more than just fearless, even
Yeah.
at Mavuno,
Yes.
a big realization that Christians by themselves cannot change society. Like, it doesn't matter how passionate you are.
Yeah.
When you go out as an individual, several things happen to you. Number one, you get hammered by the enemy.
True.
And so you find that a lot of things that began at Fearless ended up becoming big, yes, because people are brilliant. The people around are brilliant.
Yeah.
But then either it became very private and nothing to do with the faith. It just became very secular, social.
Okay.
And even sometimes you'd find the founders would even move away from their faith anchoring and it just becomes another NGO.
Yeah.
And I kept thinking, this is not it. And also we realized, as much as we're sending people every year to change society, we're not seeing a considerable shift.
Okay.
So this whole story then is a much bigger story, but at
Yeah.
some point we shifted this.
Yeah.
And now the focus is on discipleship to change society. We began to realize that Jesus' ancient method of one person discipling
Another,
people
yes.
who then disciple others, who disciple others. That's actually how you change every sector of society. It's
Yeah.
not so much about let's start causes, let's be do-gooders. It's not that. It's
Yeah.
more of how do I go into banking
Yeah.
or whatever sector I'm passionate about
Yeah.
and then start to impact people like Jesus did. Call people to follow me, help them become like Jesus, and those people lead others, and that's how we're actually going to change the world.
Amazing. So this year's summit is themed Unshakable. Why Unshakable?
Yeah, so I mean, I feel like the big sense we get right now is that the world is in the middle of some major shifts, starting with COVID, going into the major wars, Ukraine, Israel, going into some of the natural calamities we've seen in the last climate calamities that we've seen in the last 10 years that we've not seen before that. Just going into the wars and the rumors of war, it just feels like we're living in biblical times. And I think we have a strong sense that in the process of that, there's a lot of the Church of Jesus is facing major attack from a secularizing culture. And so the word we sense God was telling us is the church must learn how to become unshakable, how to become resilient. So our theme verse, 1 Corinthians 15:58, therefore, brothers and sisters, stand firm, let nothing move you. That's what we wanted this Fearless to be about, is how do we build movements of the gospel that are resilient, that cannot be repressed, they cannot be shut down. We saw the church is being shut down after COVID by government regulations, and many struggle to come back again. And we realize movements cannot be shut down in the same way. So there's a big shift in Fearless, and in this season, we're really talking about how do we become kingdom movements. How does every one of us understand how to start and be part of kingdom movements that actually can change the world?
And speaking of kingdom movements, you began Fearless Summit this year with, I say, Pastor M went up and he just meted violence. He told us some really potent truths about the realities of what we are called to be.
Yeah.
And you've spoken over time in the recent past about just this inkling that you're interested in movements and studying movements. And
But I realized we were not set up to make disciples of all nations with the way we were set up. And that's when I noticed a very interesting thing. I became a student of churches. I started looking at what churches are doing this. And I noticed that the churches that were actually making disciples of all nations were very different in setup from our church. That these churches were what have been called globally as disciple-making movements. Disciple-making movements. For some of you, that's the first time you're hearing that phrase. But I want you to keep it in mind because I believe you're going to be hearing a lot more of it as the church wakes up to this fact. By the way, movements are not loud. They don't make a lot of noise. They just take over the world. But you know, only movements can hope to keep up with the growth of the population around them. Here's the thing, regular churches raise members, but disciple-making movements raise global missionaries.
why did you see that as an apt way to start Fearless Summit 2024?
You know, I think a lot of people don't understand the way we've done church is church over the years has become sort of captive to culture. And I feel like what has happened is the church has become, and that's happened all the years. The church always picked up the model of the culture, of leadership of the culture it was in.
Yes.
And in the last century, we've been very influenced by the American church that is a corporation.
Yes.
Where the pastor is a CEO, the
Yes.
elders are like board members, the congregation are shareholders.
Yes.
And unfortunately, that mega church model, it can mobilize resource and build very big churches, but it's very hard for it to actually create a gospel movement. The gospel movement is where every single member is empowered to go out and change the world. It's something that is viral, it spreads, it cannot be stopped.
Yeah.
And so part of what I was talking about is how we came, our recovering journey from being just this big, happy mega church to actually realizing this thing, it looks like it's working to everybody else, but it's actually not going to fulfill the Great Commission. Make disciples of all nations. And so basically what I was doing in Fearless in the first talk this year was actually sharing, I'd say, the theory behind why every church must embrace disciple-making movements.
Yeah. And you know, it's not the only thing that Mavuno is currently doing. The other thing that we're doing is we're churning out amazing, great, consistent music through Mavuno worship. I don't know why music I think it's always been important, but now Mavuno there's a whole concerted effort to us having a sound. Tell us about that.
Yeah, you know, I've come to see that behind every great move of God, there's always worship. And in the Bible, you find stories like in 2 Chronicles 20, where the king goes to war and he sends his choir in front of him. That worship goes before. Every revival in history had a sound, had music that came with it. And in this season, because we're doing things that we've not done before, our mission as a church has remained the same, our vision has remained the same, but what has changed is our understanding of discipleship. And so a lot of our songs are now capturing what that means. You know, we're trying to write songs that now, songs are powerful. They're not like sermons. You listen to my sermon once, twice. If you listen to it thrice, you've really tried, you know. But a song, you put it on repeat and you play it over and over. So it's actually, it's lyrical sermons. And so I believe that what these songs do is encapsulate the values of what God is teaching us right now. And so I'm really excited at Fearless 2024 that Mavuno is launching the second EP consecutively. We launched one last year. And this one's called Give Yourself. And it's really, again, that theme verse, give yourself fully to the work of the Lord. And a lot of the songs actually come out of some of the messages we've taught at Mavuno. And they become memories for our people, helping them to understand this is who we are, this is what we're about. And hopefully then we can bless the world with this message.
Yeah, absolutely. And does Pastor Sam have any favorite songs of any of the EPs, whether it's the last year's
well, it's unfair because, I've been part of the songwriting process with the team. So if I could hurt feelings if I pick one favorite. They're all our babies, It's like when you have children, it's very hard for you to say in public who your favorite is.
This is my favorite. Okay.
But I do love all of them.
Yeah.
Especially love like in this particular one, there's just some fun ones, you know.
Yeah.
There's one called the Backsliders Anthem.
Yes.
And I think it came out of an understanding in February when we had our gathering that if you're not growing in your faith, if you're not getting closer to Jesus, if you're not pursuing Him,
Yeah.
everything else is an excuse, and you're actually backsliding. If you're not growing more passion in love with Jesus every month, every day, every year,
Yeah.
then you're actually on a route to backsliding without even knowing that you are.
Yeah.
And so this song says, give yourself fully to the work of the Lord and don't be a backslider. So
Okay,
I
you
love that
can
one.
wait
It's a
for-
fun
yeah.
song, but there's also other really good songs on that album.
Yeah. You know, Pastor M, your friend and your brother, Apmo, has been speaking about building.
Yeah.
And he's obviously challenged Mavuno with all the construction that Worship Harvest is doing. And we now have a sports arena.
Yeah.
And that's really exciting. It's the very first one, and I'm sure the first out of many
Yes,
more.
absolutely.
Tell us where you're at. Where is your mind in regards to Mavuno, moving into spaces, building?
Yeah.
What are you thinking?
Well, I guess as I've studied movements, one of the things I've realized is lasting movements are not just about ideas, but they also create institutions.
Right.
And if you look at some of the movements that have lasted, think about in the church, the Catholic Church.
Yeah.
I mean, they've gone through so many ups and downs over the years. They've had heretical popes, and then they've had
Yes.
renewals.
Yes.
But you know, the one thing about them is
Yeah.
they've continued on. And one of the things that they've done well is they've built institutions. And so one of the things young movements like us can easily be in danger of is that we become very impermanent because we're renting everywhere. And we're not creating the institutions.
Yeah.
So one of the things that we've been learning from other movements, by the way,
Yes.
this is not original,
Yes.
is that we must become builders.
Yeah.
We must purchase land, we
Yes.
must set up institutions and churches and spaces that impact community. But one of the things Mavuno has always been passionate about is that the church will not just be a building or a center that you lock up, the church building,
Yes.
but that it will be a place that adds value to its society. So I'm very excited about the arena, the Fearless Sports Arena, the first of its kind, because Hill City campus, where it's located, is surrounded by, my goodness, maybe 7,000 apartments.
True. Yeah.
And many, many, many young people.
Yeah.
And I love it that the church is actually going to become a hub. This place, my vision and my prayer is that it will be full of young people.
Yeah.
Day in, day out. We want to have one of our, like our youth pastor needs to be a sports chaplain. And
Wow,
we'll actually be
yeah.
discipling and using this as a place to disciple, but also add value.
Yeah.
So our vision, and the thing I've taught at Mavuno over the years, is the church needs to be so useful to its community that if anybody ever tried to close it, if the government ever tried to close it, the people of the community will actually demonstrate and they will say, no, we reject. You cannot
Yes.
close down this church.
Yeah, yeah. Pastor M, we are smack in the middle of Fearless Summit 2024, and we've had such amazing speakers, nuggets. I wonder if there's anything for you that has caused you to sort of like pack up or has stirred your spirit in a particular way that you're going to take out of Fearless Summit 2024.
Wow. Yeah, I think that maybe it was a confirmation. We had a really great interview. We had 3 successful interviews about the place for aggressive and for strategic ministry to young people. Africa is 50% under the age of 24, you know. We're really a young continent.
Yeah.
And one of the quotes that really grabbed me is one of the pastors said, Pastor Bato of Mavuno, she said that if your church, if Africa's median age is 19,
Yes.
or Kenya's median age, for example, is 19, if your church's median age is not 19, you're a dying church. Those are shots fired, man.
Wow.
I'm like, what?
Wow.
We have to take our youth ministry seriously.
Yeah.
And in the same talk, she also talked about the questions different generations ask
Yes.
and how we must become experts, not at teaching the gospel to the next generation in our language,
Yeah.
but in the language that makes sense to them.
Yeah.
And so I'm very excited about that. I really am praying that in the next season, Mavuno is going to discover how to reach Gen Z, Gen Alpha in ways that are relevant, and that we will see revivals in those generations. That God will act, not kids being entertained, but actually ministers of the gospel, missionaries are from those generations, planting churches, reaching their peers, starting enterprises that change the world. And that's one of my prayers. And I think this was just a fanning of that flame.
Yeah, absolutely. That's amazing. Pastor M, I want you to look into this camera and speak to those folks who have never been to a Fearless Summit, who are
my
not
gosh.
at the 2024 Fearless Summit. I know, where have you been? But tell them what they're missing and tell them how they must be here next year when we do this again.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
You know, Fearless happens once a year, and it's one of those events. I really feel like the life change that happens is incredible. Every day we have, it's not just a regular conference.
Yeah.
I think there's just so many things God is doing. And I feel like in this season, it's so important for you to understand your role in a kingdom movement, your role in sparking kingdom movements, your role in becoming a person who sparks change. That the Bible says one of you puts 1,000 to flight. The least impact that a son of God, that a child of God should have is on 1,000 people in their generation. How do you become that person? That's what we talk about at Fearless. So Fearless 2025, if you've missed Fearless, I don't know where you've been, but it's never too late. The best time to start was yesterday. The next best time is this next Fearless. See you there.
There you have it from Pastor M's mouth. If you haven't been at Fearless 2024 or any other, you have a chance to redeem yourself next year at Fearless Summit 2025. Pastor M, thank you so much for your time.
Wow, you're welcome.
Great.
It's been a pleasure.
Great.